The Kremlin's demand for loyalty has triggered a predictable cycle of institutional collapse. Fear of being labeled disloyal forces subordinates to sanitize intelligence reports before they send them to their superiors. The truth is thus scrubbed for optics and only arrives when the smoke is already visible. Public cases have proven that honesty is now a terminal career risk for the high command of Russia. Look at the case of Major General Ivan Popov. He's been in jail for a couple of years now for reporting that critical artillery shortages were hurting the Russian military, for telling his superiors that Russia needed more artillery. His removal tells every commander in Russia that reporting the facts is now treated as a criminal act. This command volatility proves that political safety outweighs all of the battlefield results. Or take a look at General Sergei Surovkin. He is also known as General Armageddon from his time inside of Syria with the Russian military. He's the architect of Russia's war, and he was disappeared for his political ties. His fall forced mid-level officers to stop reporting harsh realities to avoid being branded as unreliable. The enforcement climate has hardened significantly within Russia, as over a dozen and a half top defense ministry generals have ended up in jail. But what's even more incredible is the number of generals who simply don't know where they are. Are they in jail or are they disappeared? But for whatever reasons, nobody's heard or seen from them in a while. This purge, though, it makes bureaucrats prioritize clean paper trails over actual military hardware output. But the shrinking reserves are also compressing everything that we see. They're putting more pressure on the general corps to get results, but without money. And there's a reason there's no money. Russia's liquid national wealth fund, its assets have plummeted to only $55 billion. With only 1.9% of GDP left in cash, the Kremlin cannot afford a single expensive mistake. And that financial squeeze, it triggers a desperate lie to survive behavior inside of the hierarchy. And when reserves vanish, no official wants to sign off on expensive fixes that might fail. Sign-offs, they climb upward because distributing blame matters more than fixing the front line. The operation output is a predictable cycle of institutional and mechanical failure. Orders arrive late, forcing units to rerun maneuvers that have already collapsed. Late orders mean late repairs, while black market chips are showing a staggering 40% defect rate. Physical bottlenecks now appear across Russia, and these bottlenecks are making it harder and harder for the Russian soldiers to continue fighting. But today, as Russia is running out of cash and all of this is compounding, there's something else very important that is happening. We're seeing that it is true that a slow system bleeds time first, and then parts, and finally, options, before it is finally defeated. My name is Dr. Jason Smart. I'm a Kiev Post special correspondent and a national security advisor. This institutional paralysis is no longer just a delay. It is actively destabilizing the Putin regime. Every filtered report erodes Putin's ability to command a system that is blinding itself. Consequently, the internal security apparatus is cannibalizing the defense sector to find scapegoats. And this creates a feedback loop of fear that makes actual problem solving a form of treason. As the $52 billion cushion from the sovereign wealth fund begins to run out, the elites themselves are shifting from warfighting to regime survival. Factions are now hoarding resources for a post-collapse power vacuum. So help us tell more people about this reality. All I ask of you is this. Please subscribe now to our channel. Help us reach our goal of 275,000 subscribers. Also, be sure to like this video, share it on social media, and click another video at the end of this one so that YouTube sees that our content is worth it. Thank you. Just yesterday, we saw that Ukraine struck the Votkinsk machine building plant in the Udmurt Republic. Ukrainian FP-5 Flamingo missiles hit the workshop number 22 and workshop 36 deep in the rear. Now, Votkinsk itself sits about 1,400 kilometers, 870 miles from the border, and it proves the strategic core of Russia is very reachable. If targets this deep can be hit, the war becomes a race of repair speed, not just messaging. not just what's happening inside of Ukraine. By reaching Votkinsk, Ukraine has bypassed the front line to strike Russia's irreplaceable machine tools. Russia throughout this war has struggled to get machine tools. It's one of those things that's very hard to do by yourself. But Russia today, the most sanctioned country in the history of the world, certainly does not have all the machine parts that it needs. In fact, it's not just limited to the military. There have been bakeries in Russia that can no longer produce sliced bread because the machine to do that, it came from the West. So just imagine how backwards Russia is becoming in so many ways. Consider this. Russia today is in such a situation where nobody is willing to address the problems that they have. In a normal organization, if things aren't going well, you can sit and discuss it openly, frankly, sincerely, and give your opinion. Because everybody understands that the others in the room are part of the team, and they all have a common interest in seeing a common victory. But the Russian military doesn't work that way. Everybody is an adversary. Everybody is a potential risk. So the government there reacts the way that one would expect. It is working with very little communication, and communication often filled with lies. Just look at the attack yesterday in Votkinsk, which we just mentioned. Immediately, the Ukrainians came out and they showed videos. That is a very successful attack. But on the Russian side, the Russian Ministry of Defense totally ignored it. And then they finally said those were fires at a different location, unrelated to their facility in Votkinsk. What should we expect from them? Of course they're going to lie. What else can they do? It's like Vladimir Putin, the career KGB man. If in doubt, always crack down on your population. Always instill more fear. Lying, like instilling fear, comes to leadership in Russia quite naturally. They know exactly what to do in these situations, and that's it. But there's a very fundamental problem with that solution. And that solution's problem is that there is no solution. This in no way is going to improve Russia's ability to wage war. In what way will this make it easier for Russia to win if nobody can get to the bottom of the truth? Consider the collective insanity that exists today in the Russian military. There are hundreds of thousands of men, many of them in the military for years, but nobody can admit, now several years into the 3-day special military operation, that perhaps something is going wrong. Perhaps that 3-day special military operation has got some problems in strategy. It's not just about tactics, but nobody can do that. Everybody has to act like things are going great, that everything is going just spiffy, but it is not. What we see within Russia is that the leadership doesn't have a plan for victory. It doesn't know how to get out of the situation that it is in today. And it's not just about advancing within Ukraine. Within Russia, when you carry out an attack on something like a factory and you destroy the machine tools, the parts, the power, the predictable logistics, then what happens next? What do you do when you can't get more of them? Who will have a solution for this? There is no one that has a solution for this. Now, despite these setbacks, Russia does advance in some things. Look at the production, for instance, of the Iskander-M, which reportedly jumped quite a bit in its new productions. We saw back in 2023, they're only producing about 250 per year, but now they're producing around 700. That's an impressive cycle. That's quite a step up, but it's not nearly impressive when you consider the fact that the factory where they make the engines for them was attacked by Ukraine. That factory today is burning, and as it burns, it's going to make it harder for Russia to carry out additional attacks within Ukraine. Russia, without the ability to get more parts, without the ability to buy machinery in the West, won't have the ability to create modern weapons. And that's something that there is no solution for. That is something that will not get better as long as Russia stays inside of Ukraine. Which reminds me, please check out the first pinned comment below with the question of the day and a video that you should really see. Please do respond to the question of the day. But right below that, see how you too can help the Ukrainian soldiers to get life-saving drones and other equipment they need to fight, to win, and to come home alive. Thank you. Incredibly today, Vladimir Putin does not realize how bad his situation is. He seems, every single time when something goes wrong, to truly be surprised. Now, Vladimir Putin himself is not a very brave person. Despite his public image of looking tough, he's pretty far from it. Vladimir Putin has got a history of avoiding the public and avoiding any sort of confrontation that could challenge his regime. When Prigozhin had his uprising, Putin did not fly over to go meet him in person. Putin got on an airplane. He headed out of town as fast as he could. He wasn't sure what would happen next. Or let's take a look at Vladimir Putin's red lines as another example. We see that they're totally meaningless. Vladimir Putin likes to threaten. He likes to insinuate that he'll become violent. But at the end of the day, does he really have the guts? Does he really think that he can stand up for himself? That's quite questionable. Vladimir Putin has a long history of being a bribe taker, a long history of being dishonest. But of being brave, of standing up, he doesn't have a reputation for that. In fact, it's quite the opposite. And that's why today's situation in Russia is becoming ever more interesting. The inability for Russia to control what is happening now within their own borders is something that undoubtedly makes Putin nervous. He understands that things like the missile strikes coming down on Russia terrify the population, but it also terrifies the upper elites. The upper elites are very worried they cannot take their money out of Russian banks, because Vladimir Putin understands that if they all did at the same time, the Russian banks will lose all liquidity. For Vladimir Putin, things are simply not going the right way. It's not just that there's attacks routinely across Russia now. It's not just that the Russian government's running out of money. It's not just that the Russian military is losing terrain today inside of Ukraine. It's also the fact that his best option from here, he had always thought, would be to use forms of warfare for which the West was not prepared. By doing things like shaking up the situation in a different country, such as Iran, that's something that Russia would view to be positive. Of course, on one side, the Russian government loses. It does not get the drone parts it needs if the Iranian government's no longer in control. But at the same time, Vladimir Putin can hope, and he would probably be right, that the West very quickly will turn away from Ukraine and focus on Iran if it's attacked by the United States. Vladimir Putin is just fine with that option. If the entire world were to forget about Ukraine, it would probably be his best dream come true. Or look at the situation in Venezuela. Its leader today is unable to help Vladimir Putin. Or in the case of Cuba, the Cuban government is near its breaking point. Without the fuel that it used to get from Venezuela, it has no ability to stay afloat. It has no ability to keep running its little dictatorship. And that's why everything gets more complicated. But for Vladimir Putin's best allies in Europe, like Viktor Orban of Hungary, things are not looking better either. In fact, there are soon to be elections the month after next within Hungary. And the incredible part, most of the polling shows that the opponent to Orban's party, Peter Magyar, is up about 10 percentage points in the polls. So if Hungary were to also fall, what allies does Putin have left? There's, of course, Belarus. But does he really care about Belarus is a different question. Which countries can get him things that are not under sanctions? And Vladimir Putin does not have any allies who can help him get around sanctions anymore. And this is all putting more pressure on the greater system within Russia. These external levers are snapping, and Putin is presiding over a countdown that he cannot stop. A system that criminalizes truth cannot survive reality, and that reality is now repeatable. Orban is no longer a shield for Putin. He's just a sinking anchor. And for Vladimir Putin, those sinking anchors seem to be popping up everywhere he goes. And that's why the Putin regime looks like it might very well end, just like the Moskva. Check out this video to see why. As always, thank you for supporting Ukraine.